introduce our 80th guest speaker, Salvador Oropesa. The title of his presentation is The Presence of Don Quixote in Cormac McCarthy's Trilogy of the Border. He is Professor of Spanish and the Department Chair of Languages, so please give it up.
Thank you to Professor Vitanza and RCID for inviting me to talk today and be the 80th person doing this. I think tradition is a good thing in our studies. This is briefly what I'm going to be doing because I mean this is part of a larger article, so this is a summary. So I'll do an introduction about why Baroque literature, the use of Spanish by Cormac McCarthy, the perils of homogeneity, modernity and nostalgia, the road and its people, and then I'll touch three parts that are in both novels. Well, one is a teenager. The problems of irrepresentability, in this case, is the rape of a young teenager, male teenager. So that's and the presence of extreme violence. So the way to start a narrative, a novel with those two premises. And then an interesting character, because I mean McCarthy is accused of misogyny. So and he has maybe one of the most interesting characters of all the Pretty Horses is La Dueña, Alfonsa, and we'll see that that's the Ridean difference. No, that's why because no one of all the critics who have studied McCarthy have asked himself or herself why. Who is this dueña? I mean, why? Because it should be a doña, Alfonsa, instead of dueña, Alfonsa. No? And third, very briefly, there is a Quijada, there is a Quijote in the last novel of the trilogy, who is I call him a Chicano, but he's an indigenous Yaqui Indian. And he talks about the strategies of the poor, strategies of the weak, no, las estrategias del pobre that we talk in Latin American literature, and then a brief conclusion about the literal gaze. So the introduction is much larger than the rest of the presentation. So the presence of Don Quixote in Cormac McCarthy's Trilogy of the Border. Quote, even Cervantes could not envision such a country as Mexico, end of quote. The nectar in all the Pretty Horses. McCarthy is a writer who does not want to mediate between the text and the reader. He does not provide directions about how to read his books. But in 1992, in one of the very rare interviews given, he said, quote, the ugly fact is books are made out of books. The novel depends for its life in the novels that have been written, end of quote. In the minutes following, I will reflect on direct references by McCarthy to Cervantes and Don Quixote in the trilogy, and the conversation between a North American writer at the end of the 20th century and Spanish literature at the beginning of the 17th century. I will talk about the ideological and formal consequences of this relationship. The beginning of the Baroque period in Spain is characterized by literary novelties like the end of the Aristotelian unities in theater, as theorized by the Arte Nuevo by Lope de Vega in 1609, the originality of the protagonist of the Soledades by Luis de Góngora in 1609, a nameless, a young pilgrim, a clueless, handsome youngster who wanders around without emotional ties to any place. Don Quixote in 1605 and 1615, remember that there are two Don Quixotes, so it's are key because of their multi-perspectivism, ethnic diversity, free will, strong female characters, the interplay of literary genres, and the collapse of the authority of the narrator. Persiles y Sigismunda by Cervantes in 1617 and El Peregrino en su Patria in 1604 by Lope de Vega are Byzantine novels whose protagonists are Catholic pilgrims counter-reformists, male and female, young, free, chaste, cross-dressers, and rationalists. At the same time, these writers took the Spanish language to limits never achieved before in an extraordinary melange of excesses and epitomes of superb literature. McCarthy's trilogy is formed by All the Pretty Horses, 1992, The Crossing, 1994, and Cities of the Plain, she told me that it was cranky, so I don't know how cranky it is. Well, doesn't matter. The Crossing and Cities of the Plain. Some critics, and this is a very interesting thing, some critics expand the trilogy and indicate that Blood Meridian, 1985, could be read as a prologue to the trilogy and The Road, 2006, as its epilogue. So I think that's but again, it's an interesting way of reading the five novels instead of the trilogy. Our thesis is that McCarthy brings Cervantes and Don Quixote to the trilogy because he needs this important piece of literary tradition to represent the border. Following this logic, I make mine and expand the thesis of Lezama Lima that Hispanic American culture originates in the diverse cultures of the viceroyalty. In our literary tradition, we call this phenomenon the Barroco de Indias. It is a mixture of erudition, strangeness, modernity, diversity, and eccentricity. Severo Sardui adds to these ideas the obsession for rewriting, the continuing transmutation of forms, and Góngora and Quevedo's fatality, that all love leads to death. Góngora and Quevedo are the two most important writers of the poets of the 17th of Baroque literature. Most critics treat anecdotally the use of Spanish by McCarthy. He uses it in conversations without translation and in botanical, equine, and geographical terms. Before we explain the importance of the use of Spanish, we have to understand the implications of using Spanish. According to Ramirez-Berg, the logic followed by Hollywood that we can make extensive to literature is as follows, quote, Spanish, as opposed to other Western European languages like French, German, or Italian, spoken outside of Spain in American films signifies that A, the narrative has moved to a third world country, or the barrio, or a Puerto Rican ghetto in New York, or the Spanish southwestern border, which for Hollywood are all the same thing, where the rules of civilization no longer apply. Because English cannot be relied on its place, words and reasoning will be of little use since rationality exists only in English. Therefore, violent action is a very likely outcome. End of quote. The two main protagonists of the trilogy are John Grady, and please notice the ages of the protagonists, especially if you have seen the movie All the Pretty Horses, because the ages are very important. The two main protagonists of the trilogy are John Grady, 16, and Billy Parham, 17. Both are bilingual and use Spanish on a regular basis. According to John Kahn, their Bactinian polyglotism challenges the myth of American cultural exceptionalism. John Kahn provides a brief introduction to the direct references to Cervantes in All the Pretty Horses. Quote, John Grady and Lacy Rawlins are Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. John Grady is the man of ideas, the ardent-hearted adventurer, declining to count the cost of actions compelled by his romantic impulses. Rawlins is the worldly pragmatist who counsels against foolhardy idealism. End of quote. Harold Bloom highlights the presence of archaisms in the prose of McCarthy, following the steps of Herman Melville and William Faulkner. Mark Twain and Ernest Hemingway appear on a regular basis named by other critics. To the list we could add Cervantes. From these writers, McCarthy learned the use of a Góngorine syntax, the use of regionalisms with a strong poetic component, the landscape as a character, episodic literature, interpolated stories, a strong presence of history, contingency, hyperrealism, and popular culture. Cervantes in Don Quixote and McCarthy in the Trilogy start with an anachronistic literary genre, books of knightly deeds and the Western, respectively. The Western novel and the novels of knightly deeds were interclass genres, popular, with an illegal protagonist, or at least someone who aimed at illegality. Don Quixote states clearly that laws do not apply to him. These genres were universally known by the public. In Don Quijote, the priest, the barber, the innkeeper, his daughter, Maritornes, the dukes, among others, are experts in the genre. By the same token, in the trilogy, there are an unending number of references to the fact that the protagonists are playing the role of cowboys. Rowling states, quote, "I'm a goddamn buckaroo," end of quote. When they are lying down in the bunk beds of the Hacienda La Purísima, Rollins tells Granny, quote, "This is how it was with the old wives, ain't it?" End of quote. Don Quixote and the young cowboys are always modeling their conduct to follow the orthodox rules of their respective genres. These continuous references to how the texts are constructed warn us of dominant ideological constructions like Baroque sacralization and US conservative nostalgia of the manifest destiny in the border zone. McCarthy's prose is vital and lyric, and creates a symbolic space between North American modernism and Neo-Barroco, more of a Deleuzian rhizome because it lacks a center, and it encompasses disparate cultural traditions. It combines Hispanic, Anglo, and indigenous cultures. All the Pretty Horses starts with a vision John Grady has of the ghosts of the southern exodus of the Comanche nation, formed by warriors, women, children, and painted horses. In the words of Caroline Levine, quote, "Literary texts are sites like social situations where multiple forms cross and collide, inviting us to think in new ways about power," end of quote. In both groups of novels, mercantilism and capitalism overwhelmed the protagonists. In McCarthy's trilogy, barbed wire, mechanical vehicles, oil wells, and nuclear explosions are the enemy in contrast to the reliability and quietness of horses. In All the Pretty Horses, Grady's first girlfriend leaves him for a guy who owns a car. Alejandra is taken from him in an airplane, and the last time he sees her, she will be living in a train. Grady and Parham are taken to prison in a truck. Rollins leaves Mexico by bus. According to McGilchrist, quote, "The machine world is always the enemy," end of quote. In contrast, Grady and Alejandra start their sexual relationship horse riding. Grady verbalizes his sexuality, telling the stallion in Spanish that he is el comandante de las yeguas. In Don Quixote, water mills, windmills, and mechanical devices are the source of all misadventures. Books of knightly deeds and westerns are genres that share the road. The unequal couple of protagonists who share the road, the unequal couple of protagonists, and mythicize particular and relative brief historical moments. Both series of novels stress knights in the open. Cervantes and McCarthy deconstruct the ideological premises of the pastoral. The key of the protagonists is to recuperate a lost world. The Hidalgo makes himself in a knight, which is legally and socially unacceptable. John Grady is a middle-class kid destined by his mother to go to college, who instead decides to get a job as a cowboy in a Mexican hacienda. Billy Parham, 17, the protagonist of The Crossing, against all common sense abandons the farmhouse of his parents to return a pregnant wooden wolf back to her habitat in Mexico. In all 5 novels, the road is characterized by contingency and realism. Realism is always challenging the fantasies of the protagonists. Wounds bleed, debts have to be paid in cash, and the protagonists are continuously eating, sleeping, and getting dressed. The Mexican roads are as diverse as those of Don Quixote. In the Mormon town of the crossing on the Mexican side of the border, there are obviously Mormons, Mennonites, Tarahumaras, Yaquis, and Apaches. In the roads of Don Quixote, we have Moriscos, Basques, shepherds, priests, merchants, galley slaves, bandits, hippies, and cross-dressers. Both challenge the homogeneity of the respective official discourses. This is a time when in Mexico the official discourse was dominated by José Vasconcelos's cosmic rays. The Institutional Revolutionary Party, it didn't have the name yet, but it was on its way to, made its own the homogeneous mestizaje discourse of the revolutionary leader. Lezama Lima and Severo Sarduy, the Cuban writers and literary critics, writings go against this thesis. In Spain, between the first and the second Don Quixote, Philip III expelled the Moriscos, 1609-1614, completing an ethnic cleansing after the expulsion of the Jews in 1492 and the banning of Protestantism. I think this is always, forgotten most of the time, that the first and second Quixote are written when the state, the absolute monarchs, complete the ethnic cleansing in Spain that had started in 1492 with the expulsion of the Jews. During the whole 16th century, the 1500s, the wars against Protestantism, and between 1609 and 1614, all the Moriscos, who were all the descendants of the Muslim population who still lived in Spain. Some had converted to Catholicism, some still were practicing taqiyya, so the Islam. So that was. So that I think that's important, because again, Don Quixote is a way to create a space. A cultural space when the state is creating that homogeneity. Don Quixote and John Grady suffer of a false anachronistic aristocracy. Grady's affair with the daughter of the patron makes him believe that his privilege of American white men, his bilingualism and knowledge of horses are enough to move him up to the Mexican aristocracy. Don Quixote's knighting by the innkeeper, Mambrino's helmet, and his great-grandfather's weapons do not make him a knight. Alejandra's family comes from Toledo. Doña Alfonsa says that his lineage comes from, quote, the madness of the Spanish, end of quote. Christine Collier was the first to call the trilogy Baroque. It is interesting that all the literary, US literary critics do not use the term Baroque. It has to be a French critic who does it. So, and I'm the second one, and I'm from Spain. But again, no one single of all the unending American critics who have worked on McCarthy have used the term Baroque. For her, this term means the decentering of the vision of men, of the breakdown between illusion and reality. What Juan Carlos Rodriguez calls the dichotomy between seeing and not seeing. McCarthy's novels are full of mirrors, even anamorphic mirrors, to present reality from unusual points of view. Baroque brought to art in general, and literature in particular, the accumulation and or superposition of meanings, radical points of view, multi-perspectivism, self-reflection, chiaroscuro, dialectical prolepsis, dialogism, intertextuality instead of sources, and cultural mestizaje. For instance, Blevin's death is just one alliteration. Blevins is the youngest of all the protagonists. He's 13 and he's murdered by a Mexican police captain. It's an extra diegetic part of the novel, and I think it's a masterpiece. And McCarthy is just, his death is just an alliteration. It's just a flat sort of a bomb. That's all you have about how Blevins, who is 13, is killed. The teenager. Caroline Levine reminds us that forms trouble. Don Quixote's first adventure is a very violent scene in which a rich farmer, Juan Aldudo, is whipping his 15-year-old shepherd. Again, pay attention to the age. 15-year-old shepherd Andres, because he has lost some sheep. He's tied to an oak when Don Quixote appears because he hears delicate voices. Delicate voices may refer to a woman, but what he sees is a young man, quote, a boy naked from the waist up, end of quote. Don Quixote, who is armed, asks about the situation, and Andres responds that his master owes him the salary of 9 months, at 7 reales per month. Don Quixote condemns Aldudo to free the shepherd, pay him his salary, and go and visit Dulcinea to pay homage to her. According to Juan Carlos Rodriguez, in this first adventure, 3 core elements of the construction of Don Quixote appear. And again, this is the first real adventure of Don Quixote. Freedom, poverty, wealth, salary, money, unseen, not seen, what Rodriguez calls the literal gaze. This scene will end in an act of extreme violence, and according to our reading, in the rape of a male teenager by an adult. The adventures of all the pretty horses start when Grady and Rollins meet Blevins, 13, when they are ready to cross the border. Like in Don Quixote, Blevins' nudity exacerbates the desire of men in a position of power to encounter him. As soon as Don Quixote leaves, Aldudo grabs Andres by his arm and ties him back to the oak. He tells Andres, quote, I think I'm not done yet. I'm going to skin you alive as you fear, end of quote. He whips him so hard that when Aldudo left him, Andres looked dead. We learn from the narrator that el villano le estaba dando con una pretina muchos azotes. From this sentence, we are interested in 2 words. Villano, literally a person who comes from the village, and metaphorically a bad person. The second word is the instrument used for the whipping, a pretina, which is, according to the Royal Academy, a belt with a buckle or brooch used in the waist to hold a garment. Critics of this episode have discussed in detail if Andres deserved the whipping or not. There are an unending number of articles about this point. If the whipping or not, without asking themselves about the extreme violence of the episode. It is interesting how we just perceive it as a natural thing. My question, going back to the seeing, not seeing, is what are we omitting as readers conditioned by the ellipsis of the scene? The word that Aldudo uses to justify his actions is gana, and Covarrubias, in his 1611 Tesoros, with a dictionary, tells us that the synonyms of gana are desire, appetite, and will. He also indicates that desollar, skin, has a second metaphorical meaning besides skinning. Quote, llevar más derechos de los que se deben especialmente a los pobres. To appropriate more rights than those granted, especially regarding poor people. Ignacio Padilla, in his study on Don Quixote, establishes a relationship between the Protestant-Catholic debate on free will and the use of ellipsis in literature, but he does not elaborate. Again, this is I think this is a new reading of the scene, which is not common in Don Quixote. Cervantes is going to give us a second opportunity to fill the gaps of this episode. Andres' episode happened in chapter 4 of the first Don Quixote, but in chapter 31, by chance, Don Quixote meets Andres again on the road when Andres is walking to Sevilla. Sevilla was the exit port to the Americas and port to a picaresque life. I will dare to call it a border town. The action of Cervantes' picaresque novel Rinconete y Cortadillo happens in Sevilla. The second time, Don Quixote says that the villain was whipping him with the reins of a mare. Andres' recount of the episode adds an important detail. When he saw himself over me, the storm broke, descargó el nublado, and it seems to me that I will never again be a man in my life. One of the critics, Redondo, mentions the loss of virility of Andres because of the whipping, but he does not explain how this happened. If we put together the delicate voices, the male gaze, the nudity of the teenager, the belt, the loose pants, the skinning, desire, the storm, the more sanitized version the second time Don Quixote tells the story, and the more graphic version by Andres, his loss of virility and his exile to a place where he can reinvent himself, my hypothesis is that we are in a rape scenario. In his study on sodomy in early modern Spain, Christian Berco studied 500 cases in the Inquisition of Aragon, and most cases are of adults sodomizing young men. Berco indicates that almost no locals were ever accused of sodomy. Most of the cases were strangers. Testimonies indicate that young men considered normal that they could be the object of desire by old men. This happens in 3/4 of the cases. Great men lost their honor and virility. Andres's case is linked to salary, but Blevin's, in All the Pretty Horses, is linked to sumptuary objects. It is more medieval than early modernity. Blevin's owns two extremely luxurious objects, a superb horse and a gun. Grady said, quote, "Suppose that we wanted to trade that horse off for one less likely to get us shot, which will happen." So this is an Alexis. And the gun was a 32-20 Colt. I watched a few YouTubes about the use of the gun. It was an impressive revolver. We learned that Blevins left for Mexico after his stepfather whipped him, and he may have killed him or injured him. Quote, "I told that son of a bitch that I wouldn't take a whipping off of him, and I didn't." End of quote. Let us notice that Blevins is an elliptical character. Both novels make it clear that Andres and Blevins are not completely innocent. In both sets of novels, it is key the topic of the ownership of the horse, because he who is not the owner cannot dominate the horse. The ability of training a horse is also important. During a real storm, Blevins loses his horse, gun, and clothes. Quote, "Blevins was naked save for an outsized pair of stained undershorts." End of quote. Later, they meet a group of waxmakers. Quote, "Blevins sat with his bare legs stretched out before him, but they looked so white and exposed lying there on the ground that he seemed ashamed, and he tried to tuck them up under him and to cover his knees with the tails of the borrowed shirt he wore." End of quote. Until the apparition of the male gaze, this scene seemed to be a pastoral moment, like the scene when Don Quixote meets the goat herders, and they share with him their bread, wine, and cheese, and Don Quixote, wine and well-fed, pronounces the discourse of the Golden Age, which is pure nostalgia, aristocratic nostalgia. In contrast, in this scene, at one point, the leader of the cereros, of the waxmakers, asks Grady, "Who is the boy?" Grady responds, "Un muchacho nomás," just the guy. Once the leader learns that Blevins is not his relative, he asks Grady if he wants to sell him. Again, the action is in the late 40s. So this sale does not happen, but sends a chilling message to the reader about future scenarios in the plot. Later in the action, once the three of them are in prison, the captain informs Grady during his interrogation that Blevins, quote, "don't have no feathers," end of quote, that he lacks pubic hair, what leaves Grady indifferent. After Rollins' interrogation, Grady, they have the following conversation. Rollins said, "What happened?" "Nothing." "What'd you tell him?" "I told him you were full of shit." "You didn't get to the shower room?" "No." You were gone a long time." "Yeah." "He keeps a white coat there on a hook. He takes it down and puts it on and ties it around his waist with a string." John Grady nodded. End of quote. Most critics coincide that a rape happened. According to Peebles, quote, "Blevins and Rollins are probably raped by the captain." End of quote. According to Kant, Rollins is probably raped. The rape is extra-diegetic. As we already said, Blevins' death is represented just by an alliteration. just the flat sort of the pot. The elliptical rape of young men, the brutal of consequences of exercising your freedom, the inhuman working condition of Alfonsa instead of Doña Alfonsa. What is a dueña? According to the Royal Academy, is one person who has dominion or lordship over somebody or something. 2, master of the house and its servants. 3, in old poetry, loved woman. 4, tutor, preceptor. 5, nun or lay sister lady who in the past lived in a convent. 6, widowed governess that because of her authority and respect oversaw the maids of the principal house. 7, married lady of a house. And 8, woman who has ceased being a virgin. End of quote. So all these things can be a dueña. So Derrida defines the difference, like the one in Doña Dueña, as a deferral of meaning. And this is a good way to understand the indefinite position of Doña Alfonsa. She is matriarchal and patriarchal, a lady but confined to the exile of a hacienda in the periphery of Mexico, in a border state like Coahuila. She is the guardian of the virginity and honor of her niece Alejandra, even if Alfonsa knows that these are anachronistic values already. Baroque dueñas were in charge, let's not forget that Baroque dueñas were in charge of feminizing the domestic interior of palaces once the nobility became urban and left the uncomfortable medieval castles. If you watch Game of Thrones, you can see that. So, Doña Alfonsa is the character who speaks the most in the whole novel. Doña Rodriguez, there are a number of, there are 3 different dueñas in Don Quixote. They are the target of jokes. But let's go to Doña Alfonsa. Christine Collier stresses her proto-feminism using 2 of her quotations. And again, I think Doña Alfonsa is important because of the, McCarthy is always accused of misogyny, and in his novels, let's say. So Doña Alfonsa says, quote, "The societies to which I have been exposed seem to me largely machines for the suppression of women," end of quote. Collier expresses the anti-Hegelianism of the character, and I think this is very important. This is one of these key sentences to understand McCarthy. It is supposed to be true that those who do not know history are condemned to repeat it. I don't believe knowing can save us. So I think that's key. Her interlocutor is a Grady who does not learn from his trips, and Grady is the best example. He doesn't learn from his trips to Mexico or his vicissitudes in the United States. Grady will pay his lack of learning with solitude and death. Doña Alfonsa defines history as a constant that repeats itself ceaselessly, of, quote, greed and foolishness and love of blood, end of quote. Notice that the conjunctions indicate that there is no causality among these constants. It is the defeat of the humanist ideal. Doña Alfonsa puts together the Mexican Revolution and the Spanish Civil War in a discourse full of blood, virgins, bulls, and men with a strong Hemingway flavor. Quijana or Quesada, that's the last part of the quote from Don Quixote. They will have it his surname was Quijada or Quesada, for here there is some difference of opinion among the authors who write on the subject. Although from reasonable conjectures it seems plain that he was called Quejana. This, however, is of but little importance to our tale. It will be enough not to stray a hair's breadth from the truth in the telling of it. End of quote. The Baroque authors cannot agree if Don Quixote comes from the lineage of the jaw, Quejada, the cheese, Quesada, or the complaint, Quejana. The narrator makes fun of the narrating process, alluding to supposed authors and accepting the modern concept of literary truth. The most obvious presence of Don Quixote in the crossing are the interpolated stories, well studied by critics with a consensus that they are relevant to the plot and they enrich it. Billy encounters 3 storytellers. But one of the characters is a Yaqui indigenous person. Quote, my name is Quijada. I work for Mr. Sims. I'm superintendent of the Nauerichic, which is an hacienda, end of quote. Being Quijada an indigenous, he has to introduce himself like the characters of the Picaresca because he does not have authors to introduce him. Quijada is important because he works for William Randolph Hearst in the Hacienda La Bitácora, and secondly because he analyzes Boyd's corrido. Boyd is Philip Parham's brother. So Boyd has had killed one of the bad guys, and so there is a corrido that becomes that people are singing about him. Quote, Quijada shook his head. The corrido tells all and it tells nothing. I heard the tale of the güerito years ago, before your brother was even born. You don't think it tells about him? Yes, it tells about him. It tells what it wishes to tell. It tells what makes the story run. The corrido is the poor man's history. It does not owe its allegiance to the truths of history, but to the truths of men. It tells the tale of that solitary man who is all men. It believes that where two men meet, one of two things can occur and nothing else. In the one case, a lie is born, and in the other, death. And of course, this is another. McCarthy is McCarthy. Quijada explains from his position of a marginal indigenous person the strategies of the poor men. Since the Middle Ages, poor men have used the ballads to express their frustration. The modern ballad, the corrido, is based on the truth of fiction. It is irrelevant if Boyd killed the foreman or not. What is relevant is the poetic justice brought to the community. According to McCarthy, Don Quixote's descendant is a wise Yaqui man who paradoxically asks Boyd to abandon his Quixotism. Billy, like Grady, does not learn from his mistakes. To finish, the trilogy finishes with an epilogue in which an old Billy Parham is wandering in a desolate Arizona freeways in which he has visions. Quote, out on the desert to the west stood what he took for one of the ancient Spanish missions of that country. But when he studied it again, he saw that it was the round white dome of a radar tracking station. Beyond that, and partly overcast also in the moonlight, he saw a row of figures struggling and clamoring silently in the wind. It's like, remember that the novels had started with a vision of Grady seeing the exodus of the Comanche nation. In the morning, the storm had passed, and what he saw out on the desert in the new day's light were only rags of plastic wrapping hanging from a fence where the wind had blown them. And of course, barbed wire is of course the enemy of cowboys, and it is always an element that repeats itself in all the novels. The common denominator of the 5 novels is the literary truth, the constant tension between literary genre and reality, without sentimentalism, nostalgia, or happy endings. The old Parham cannot distinguish between a Spanish mission and the technological present. He can see the ghosts of Apaches, Yaquis, Tarahumaras, Mormons, Mennonites, and Franciscans, because they have left their mark in the desert. Don Quixote's Barroco de Indias challenges the manifest destiny of a monocultural American culture scarred by the war. Thank you.
Sir, Cormac McCarthy uses a lot of Spanish language in his novels, and I was just wondering, you know, as a professor of Spanish language and literature, how you see his use of Spanish language and English language like working together in terms of like how authentic do you read it?
Oh, his Spanish is very, very good. There are mistakes, but I think he leaves them on purpose because I think he has editors, etc., who but I think they are left on purpose. He lived for 1 year in Spain, so being he was of course Spain was during Franco's dictatorship, but even during the dictatorship, Spain had two places where there was the summer of love, so where hippie colonies were. One was in Cadaqués, close to the Dalí house, and then in the Balearic Islands, and he was in the Balearic Islands. So, and then of course he moved to El Paso, and he has lived since for many years now in El Paso and on the border. So I think the most important part of his use of Spanish is that he doesn't translate. So there is no, I mean, if you don't know Spanish, then you have to go to the internet, and there are websites in which you can find the translation. So, and you cannot follow and you don't have enough clues to follow the conversation if you don't know Spanish. The other thing is, especially in his description of the desert, in which all the botanical words in Spanish, there are tons of them. So and that's a very beautiful English, at least from my point of view of a non-native speaker. And of course, then in equine, so in everything that has to do with horses. I mean, reminding us, of course, that all the rancho culture is a Spanish one. So I mean, we cannot forget that maybe the Western is the most racist of all the literary genres or cinematographic genres in American literature. So it's the most sanitized, and we would say the whitewashing of Western is brutal. No? We know that by 1900, 1/3 of all the cowboys, vaqueros, were Mexican. African American vaqueros are completely, even there was the other day an article in the Atlantic that someone posted in Facebook about how two of the westerns, what is the name of the actor who was the protagonist of tons of westerns, who was a white supremacist? John Wayne. Two of his movies based on real life characters. The real life characters were African American. So, and you end up with John Wayne. So I think it's a way to take the American or the U.S. Monolingual reader out of his or her comfort zone. So I think that's the purpose.
Maybe I missed this. Could you explain the difference between La Dueña and Doña, and how it is misogynist?
Well, no, I think that, no, okay, yeah, you're right. I didn't explain myself well. Okay, what I found interesting, and again, as students of literature, the first thing that you have to learn, especially if you want to write about a writer, that there is a lot of literary criticism written about him or her, is that you have to read it. So there is no way around it. So there are 20 books on McCarthy, you have to read the 20 books on McCarthy, one after the other. There is a moment that they start repeating themselves, I have to say. So, and what I found interesting is that no one literary critic found strange this Dueña Alfonsa. It should be Doña Alfonsa. Dueña is a 17th century kind of high-class maid, which explains very well the character of Doña Alfonsa. Doña Alfonsa is literally a 17th century dueña in a 20th century Mexican hacienda. But no one had said, okay, why the hell are you calling this lady Dueña Alfonsa when it should be Doña Alfonsa? And then that's, again, you have to go, and in Don Quixote, there is a lot of tension between the opinions others have on dueñas and the defense that dueñas do of themselves. So in Don Quixote, dueñas defend, especially Doña Rodriguez, okay, saying it properly, because Doña Rodriguez is a doña, which Don Quixote was not. Don Quixote was not Don Quixote. The Don is something that he called himself Don, but he was not Don. He was just an hidalgo. He was not. He should not use the title of Don. Doña Rodriguez has a voice, and she does a defense of Dueña. While the same thing happens with Dueña Alfonso. In a novelist that has been criticized for his misogyny, the character that talks the most in All the Pretty Horses is Dueña Alfonso. So, and she has two long conversations with Grady, in which he explains the situation of women in Mexico in the late 40s, of course, high-class women. So, where women is a different story.
And you consider dueña, la palabra dueña, como quedar, she's this thing keeping something.
Yeah.
But she's keeping una historia, yeah? Like history. I'm thinking in Spanish because it's the only way I can understand dueña is as a Spanish entity. So would you think of her as keeper of history, as flawed as that history is, as flawed as she's trying to put that history into her charge? Because when I hear dueña, I think of landlady.
Yeah, but this case is more of a, yeah, of course he's an owner. I mean, they own Hacienda La Purísima de la Concepción, whatever, which is I don't know how many thousand acres in the state of Coahuila. No, that's after the revolution. So let's not forget that the revolution has already happened. But I thought from, you're right, I had not thought about that way of dueña's owner, but I always went to the 17th century meaning of dueña, no of this like, yeah, she was like a governess, so of a manor. So that's what a dueña was. I mean, if you, I think in Gothic literature, Rebecca. In Rebecca, you have that dueña, who is, oh, yeah, because that's also what the popular Sancho Panza said. Oh, dueñas are a little bit, and then dueñas have to defend themselves. So that's the.
How was it related to Hegelianism again?
Well, it was it's the idea of that we cannot learn, and I think that's a McCarthy point, that we cannot learn from history, that we just repeat ourselves in the sense that we are greedy and we are violent and we just there is no and all the characters. If you go to all the characters in the novels, they all end up dead, except the Parham, the last one who, but because they don't learn from their mistakes, and they just they go to Mexico, they have an awful experience there because they have they think they are cowboys, but there is no room for cowboys in modern life anymore. So they and they get killed, or they get killed when they come back. And same thing with Don Quixote. He goes to the road and he dies. And all the wounds bleed, and every time they want to buy something, they have to pay with the money. And it is interesting because in McCarthy and in Cervantes, they are always, again, getting dressed, eating, and sleeping, or tending wounds. So that's so you have that again and again. So. Anything else?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.